Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's online webinar. Today's topic, we will talk about discovering the latest tax incentives, which will be presented by Gwendoline, tax expert from UEL, Union des Entreprises Luxembourgeoises. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a few words about the Luxembourg Startup Association. Even though I'm sure a lot of you know us already, it's always nice to have, again, a little recap summarizing of what we are doing for the startup community. For those who don't know us, we are the only founder-driven startup association really actively lobbying and advocating for legislation that benefits startups. Today we have around 275 startups which are members, and the more members we have, the more representative we are, and the stronger is our voice when we really go and talk to the different policymakers and the government. So if you are not part yet of the startup community, and if you're thinking of joining, I just wanted to emphasize that it's really important for us to have you as a member, to have basically your voice, to become more representative, and also to become stronger when we advocate for new policies and basically defend your interests on a political level. Next to the lobbying activities, we also, of course, have other services that we provide for the startup members, such as, for example, events like today. Today is an online event, but we also have physical events where you can meet the startup community, so the other entrepreneurs. You can also meet VCs and investors, and as well experts like today to have informational sessions. We also provide our members with legal support through our legal toolbox. So in our legal toolbox, we have various legal documents and templates that you can download and basically use for your startup. And we also have a really nice startup advisor program. So it's a full program where we have 50 different founders and experts. So it's a mix of both, who are there to help you in every challenge that you might have for your startup, or the next goal, or what you want to achieve, and how you want your startup to grow. So wherever you have a question in a certain category, so we have 10 different categories, such as fundraising, or how to increase your sales, or go-to-market strategies, or legal and IP. You can just basically contact us, and then we put you into contact with introduce you to one of our advisors, and then you can get up to 5 hours of personalized coaching, like advisory session, one-to-one with your dedicated advisor to help and guide you for your startup to grow. So I will not take further time to go more in detail about the association. If you want to know more, you can always contact me. It's contact@pulse.lu or Marielle @pulse.lu. And now I will leave the floor to Gwendoline, who will now dive into the topics of the latest tax incentives. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Marielle. Thank you very much. Thank you also very much for Pulse for hosting us the UL today. So first of all, hello everyone, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for also taking the time during your lunch break, for this webinar. As a brief description of myself or introduction, my name is Gwendoline Berger. I've recently joined the UL tax team, in February, after many years, I would say more than a decade, in a Big Four. I always navigated in the tax field, and more particular in the personal tax field. So this is the reason why today I'm really glad to be in front of you and to present you the overview of all these new tax measures that has been, for some of them, I would say, modified, and some for new one at the same time. So moving on the agenda. So I will make a short introduction about this new measure. Going through the different measures briefly, we will have 4 measures that we will go through. Actually, the new young employee bonus, the new rental allowance, the profit participating bonus, and the new expatriate regime. And finally, we will conclude with some additional word on those topics. So as I said, for the brief introduction, clearly the government is really concerned about the talent attraction, and this is basically what has been designed in the coalition agreement. And actually, this is the objective that has been really focusing on this agreement. And the key message is really to keep reinforcing the attraction of the talent and obviously their retention too. As a result, there are four main measures and four main different remuneration tools that we will go through in a moment. So, as I already said just before in the agenda, those four measures are dedicated to talent. They will help definitely the employer to implement new different tax measures for the employee. Here, the agenda has been designed depending on, I will say, a life cycle around the age of the collaborator. So there are two brand new measures, so the young employee bonus and the rental allowance, that are really dedicated to young employee, so meaning under 30 years old. That's why they are in blue. So just to give you some colors to make it a bit more representative. And additional measures that are not really new. So talking about the profit participating bonus and the expatriate bonus that are available, I would say, for everyone, regardless the age. I would just mention something maybe around the expatriate or the expatriate regime, where here there won't be like dedicated and focused to new collaborator, but more on high qualified employee. But we will come back on the details a little bit later. But here this slide is really to show you what are the different measures, to whom they are destined, and also what are the different exemption that the employee can benefit from. And I'm sure that you understand that we are going through all these measures. And for each measure, we will go through details on what is the aim of this measure, what are the conditions to be eligible or to benefit from this measure. Also, we will have always an example to give you to make it a bit more concrete. And then how you can use it as a startup. So if we take the first measure, talking about the new employee bonus. So what it is concretely? So this measure is really a measure that has been designed for young and new collaborator. Because here we are talking about collaborators that hold their first job in Luxembourg. The aim is really to, I would say, for the employer to give an additional incentive to the employee to help them to start their working life in Luxembourg. This is applicable as from January this year, 2025. And the amount that can be exempt from tax corresponds to 75% of the amount that will be granted. So to give you the condition and in which condition it will be applicable, as I said, here we are talking about young people, young collaborators, so new joiner, and the under 30 years old at the beginning of the tax year, who work in Luxembourg and have their first permanent employment contract in Luxembourg, meaning that this employment contract has to be signed before the 1st January 2025. This is clearly a requirement to keep in mind. Obviously with a company which is established in Luxembourg or abroad, as long as it has a permanent establishment in Luxembourg. It's also key to understand that we are talking about the first permanent employment contract. So really talking about the unlimited contract. So a contrat à durée indéterminée in French. We're not talking about the fixed-term contract or the CDD in French. In terms of conditions related to the gross annual remuneration, the collaborator cannot receive a remuneration exceeding 100,000 euro a year before the incorporation of any benefit in kind or in cash that he could receive apart. Also, the benefit of this measure can be granted for maximum 5 years as long as the collaborator stay with the same employer. Because indeed, if the collaborator decide to resign and move with another employer, definitely the condition of having the first permanent contract in Luxembourg is not met anymore. Referring to the amount of the eligible amount of the bonus that can be granted, here there are 3 different amounts that could be granted depending on the remuneration of the collaborator. So the maximum annual eligible premium would be 5,000 euro a year if the annual gross remuneration of the collaborator is below 50,000 euro. Once again, before the incorporation of any benefit in kind or in cash he could receive. The premium would be a bit lower, so amounting to 3,750 for an annual gross remuneration, which will be comprised between 50,000 euro and 75,000 euro, once again, before the incorporation of the benefit in kind or in cash. And then the maximum annual eligible amount of the bonus will be reduced to 2,500 euro a year if the annual gross remuneration of the collaborator is between 75,000 euro and below the famous threshold of 100,000 euro a year. So that's, I would say, the condition to benefit from this bonus. This is also something really important to mention about people joining around the year or part-time people. If you have those collaborator with joining, I don't know, maybe in March or whatever, pay attention to the date of the signature of the contract, because as I said, it shall not be before the 1st January 2025 for this year. And for people on part-time or also people joining during the year, it's important to make a projection of the annual remuneration for the year. So meaning if someone is joining in June, it's important to have an extrapolation of the remuneration as from the 1st January until the end of the year, and not only compute the remuneration from 1st January until the end of the year to apply the correct amount of eligible amount of bonus. So it's important for you to have that in mind. To make it maybe more concrete, here is an example of a Luxembourgish company which allocates a young employee bonus to one of his young collaborators named Jérôme. So this collaborator is 24 years old and signed his permanent employment contract with the company on the 1st February 2025. So as I said, this person joined in the course of the year, so here February. So it's important to make this famous extrapolation of the remuneration, so computing the remuneration as if this person would have been there for the whole year. So here, the gross remuneration that the person receives on an annual basis corresponds to 55,000 euro. So we need to come back on the previous slide to see exactly the amount of the bonus that could be allocated. And here it corresponds to the ceiling of 750 euro for the year, because the remuneration is between 50,000 and 75,000 euro for the year. So the company decided to grant to Jérôme the full amount, so corresponding to 3,700 euro. And in terms of taxation, what happened? The 75% exemption will apply directly on this 3,700 euro, meaning that the amount of 2,812 euro will be completely exempted from tax, and the remaining part, so the difference between the 3,750 and the 2,812, would be taxed as a non-periodic income. It's also key to mention that here we are talking about tax. We are not talking about the social security contribution, because here the 75% exemption apply only for tax purposes, whereas the social security contribution will apply on the full amount. But here we are really focusing on the tax aspect. So that's clearly a way to have a really higher amount of net remuneration for the employee, and on the side of the employer to really grant an additional incentive for the employee, either for attracting him or either to retain him for at least 5 years. Moving on the obligation as an employer, if you decide to grant this young employee bonus for your employee, you must complete the formality that are on the screen. So actually verify that the application condition of the bonus are met. And there declare this amount, so the amount of the bonus, in the employee payrolls. Once again, everything that is granted by an employer has to be mentioned somewhere on the payroll side. So this is the reason why it's important to have it in mind again. Maybe it might make sense, but once again, it's better to have it and hear it again. In terms of controls, or I don't know, in case of control of the tax administration, it's really key for you to have all the supporting documents that justify that the condition are met. So remember the condition regarding the age, regarding the contract, and so on. So that's really key to have all this information on your side, and also to have the proof coming from the employee to make sure that the contract that they sign with you constitute the first permanent employment contract in Luxembourg. So that's really a key requirement, and the proof regarding this first permanent employment contract shall be provided by the employee to the employer. Obviously, as many proof you have, as many secure you are as an employer. Regarding you as a startup, are you eligible? Yes, of course, there is no condition around the company, so that's fully something that you can implement to your employees. The only thing, as I said just before, is just to have in mind and to make a check on the condition of eligibility at the employee level. So that would be the only, I would say, warning on this implementation for this premium. Moving on the second premium, on the second tax measure, here we will talk about the new rental allowance. So as I said, it's new. As you will see, it's in blue, so meaning that there are some conditions regarding the age, as mentioned at the very, very beginning. Here, indeed, we all know how complicated it is to find an accommodation when arriving in Luxembourg or even in the greater region. That makes things a bit even more complicated when you're just starting your professional life in Luxembourg. So this is in that, I would say, spirit that this allowance has been implemented. So here the idea is that the employer could grant a monthly allowance, so here with a maximum of 1,000 euro, which will be exempted, partially exempted from tax, so up to 25%, in order to somehow help the new joiner with his monthly rent. This rental allowance has been applicable since June 2024. And as I said again, this is really something to help and to attract people. So here again, the objective is the same that the first one, and this is also what we will see for the next one. Once again, emphasizing on the retention and the attraction. In terms of application and on the condition, there are conditions that are linked to the eligible housing. So the residence on which one the bonus or the allowance will apply would be the primary or the main residence of the employee, meaning that it cannot be a secondary house somewhere else. It really needs to be located in Luxembourg, or it could be in Broad, so talking about the greater region, but has to be the main property. It could be rent or co-rent. At the level of the employee, there are also some conditions that need to be met, meaning that obviously the employee has to work in Luxembourg. There is this famous condition related to the age. As mentioned, we are in the premium in blue, so under 30 years old at the beginning of the tax year. And earning an annual gross salary not exceeding 30 times the qualified minimum salary. So that's really key to have also this information in mind, because depending on the premium that will be implemented, the condition related to the annual gross salary might be different. In terms of allowance, as I said, we are talking about an exemption of 25%, which is limited to 1,000 euro on a monthly basis. So for full-time employment or for full months, but it's also really key to have in mind also that this premium cannot be higher, than the monthly rent that is mentioned in the contract, in the monthly contract, renting contract. So that's really important to make the difference between the amount that you're going to grant to your employee, and on the other side, what is the amount of the rent that is basically mentioned in the monthly rent. To make it in a more concrete way, we still have our company Alpha, which allocate a monthly rental allowance to Sarah, so an employee, a young employee under 30 years old. Sarah rents her apartment in France, and the monthly rent amounts to 1,400 euro. She received an annual remuneration lower than 30 times the qualified minimum salary in Luxembourg, because she received an annual gross remuneration of 55,000 euro in 2025. So if we make the comparison between what is actual cost of the monthly rent of 1,400 and 1,100, the maximum that could be allowed, it means that the portion on which the exemption would apply would still be 1,000 euro. It cannot be on the 1,400 euro. So it means that even though the company in this example decide to grant to Sarah a rental allowance of 1,400 euro, it means that only 25% of 1,000 euro would be exempt from tax. And the rest, so the difference between the 1,400 euro minus the 250 euro corresponding to the exemption, would be subject to taxation. Also, as an additional information for you regarding this allowance, if there is two names on the renting contract, it still could be possible to grant to your collaborator this premium. Nevertheless, it's important to keep in mind that the amount of the rent has to be divided by 2. Because indeed, on the other side, so for the other co-renter, it's also possible to have the benefit of this measure as long as the conditions are met, but it's still possible. So meaning that if we have two names on the renting contract, it's really important to divide the amount of the monthly rent by 2 and to make the computation on the amount that needs to be granted per person. Also, in terms of address, and this is something that needs to be raised, is concerning the address. As I said, this premium is really allocated to the rental, so meaning to the main residence. It's important to make sure that there is a certain accordance between what is mentioned in the renting contract and in your HR tool, to make sure that the address is the same, and to make sure that as a proof, you can prove that this is the main property. In terms of obligation as an employer, so if you decide to grant this rental allowance to one of your young collaborators, it's important that to verify once again that the application conditions for this allowance are met, included this famous ceiling corresponding to the maximum or the cap relating to the annual gross remuneration, and to declare it in the employee payrolls. And it's important that the identification should be clearly mentioned in the payroll book too. It could be controls from or requests from the tax administration in that respect. Therefore, you might be in a position to provide any supporting document, including the copy of the lease contract, the renting contract, to verify that the conditions to apply this regime are met. If you want to have more information, we also put at your disposal the link to the tax administration website, where you can find some additional information with the circular dated on September 2024. So as a startup, yes, you would be also eligible. Once again, the only thing that needs to be on your WARM, it's really to make sure that the condition at the employee level are met and verified. So moving on the third part of this fourth tax measure. So here we will focus on the profit participating bonus. So we are talking about the prime participative in French. This is not a new premium. Indeed, it was introduced in 2021. And the idea behind was also to have a tool for the employee to reward and to retain the employees for their performance. So the profit participating bonus is exempt from income tax at the level of the employee up to 50% of its amount. We prepare also a brochure that you can find on our website, which is available in French or in English, and just have to click on the link that we put at the bottom of the slide so that you can have access to it. And you will have more information on how to use it, how to compute it, and so on. But to make it short, what are the changes that appeared this year for 2025? So we had a new tax package called the Entlastung Pack that appeared in July 2024. And in that tax package, we have an increase of the ceiling for the eligible bonus, which at the end of the day gives this tax measure even more advantageous and more attractive. So typically for this premium or this bonus, there are two ceilings that need to be computed, one at the level of the employer and one at the level of the employee. So at the level of the employer, the idea is to understand what would be the total amount that the employer could grant to the employee. And this total envelope the amount that could be granted increased from 5% in the past to 7.5% now on the positive results on the year -1, so on the previous year. We will come back on that a bit later. At the level of the employee, we also have an increase on the portion of the annual gross salary that could represent this premium. So it increased from 25% to 30%. And we are talking about the salary on the current year. As I said, these new ceilings are active since this year, so 1st January 2025. So what are the conditions? So at the level of the employer, we are talking about employer having a commercial, forestry, liberal and profession. So basically employer, but really key condition relates to having an accrual accounting during the year when the bonus is granted, so the current year, plus having an accrual accounting for the previous year. And this is a key condition for the moment. At the level of the employees, they could be eligible as long as they work in Luxembourg, regardless the age, regardless the amount of remuneration. And they need to be affiliated to Social Security system in Luxembourg or abroad under certain conditions. Basically, for this condition, that's if Luxembourg sign a bilateral agreement with this country, it could fit into this affiliation. Regarding the amount of the profit participating bonus, as I said before, there are two steps, one for two ceilings, one at the level of the employer and one at the level of the employee. So for the employer, it corresponds to maximum 7.5% of the positive result of the accounting of the previous year. And for the employee, it corresponds to maximum 30% of the annual gross salary of the current year. Once again, an example to make it more concrete and maybe more studiable. So we still have our company Alpha achieving a positive result of 450,000 euro in 2024, so last year. They are willing to allocate a profit participating bonus to one of the employees, so here Jean. So we need to go into that two steps. So the first step will be to compute the ceiling of the employer, so meaning what is the total envelope that could be allocated to this premium. So here we are talking the positive result, so the 450,000 euro that we multiply by the 7.5%, which is the maximum allowed for this bonus. And it equals to 33,750 euro. That would be the maximum envelope or the global envelope that could be allocated to the employee of Alpha company. Here, the company decided to only retribute one employee. So here, Jean. So now we need to go a bit deeper on the ceiling for Jean. So his annual remuneration, annual gross remuneration corresponds to 55,000 euro in 2025, on which we apply the 30% corresponding to the maximum ceiling. And at the end of the day, it means that the Alpha company could provide a bonus, a profit participating bonus to Jean, amounting to a maximum of 16,500 euros. And for him, so for Jean, it means that half of this amount, so 8,250, would be completely exempt from tax, and the remaining part will be subject to income taxation as a non-periodic income. As I said, the first ceiling, so the employer ceiling, is really the total amount that could be granted to all employees, so all the collaborators that the Alpha company decide to reward for their performance. So it means that if the company would have decided to include additional people, we still have this 33,000 euro, in which one the company will allocate part of this amount to each employee. Keep it in mind that there are also this employee maximum ceiling that will apply. Moving on the condition or the obligation as an employer. So once again, if you decide to grant this bonus to your employee, it's really important to declare it in the employee payroll and also to communicate to the relevant tax office a nominative list of the beneficiary. Actually, there is a link to a website, so going to the tax administration, where you can have exactly the format on which one the information has to be provided to the tax administration. Actually, it's an Excel sheet where you need to provide some information. So that's really easy to implement. Once again, if there is a control of the tax administration or any request from the tax administration, that's really key to keep all the supporting documents to which verify that the conditions for applying this regime are met. Obviously, if at one moment there is a failure in complying with those reporting obligations, the tax administration could also revoke the application of the favorable regime, and indeed it means that the full part of the bonus will be directly fall into the normal taxation, so meaning that at the global tax rate of the collaborator. So that's really key to have and to verify that all the conditions are met, which is fully true, once again, at the level of the startup or any company, to make sure that the conditions are verified. There is something really important to keep in mind as a startup. As I said just previously, the first year of existence, the startup will not be eligible because definitely the startup will not have the accrual accounting for the previous year. So for those companies, it will not apply. And the same if the company is in a lost position. So that's something that needs to be also understand on your side, because here no participating bonus could be granted. Once again, there are some changes that has been made last year, which are really encouraging and reinforcing all this retention and attraction. But we know, and especially in that condition and in that situation for company that are in lost position or for the newly brand company, we still know that there are some improvement that could be made. Last but not least, we will go through the new expatriate regime. So once again, this regime is not new because it was implemented in 2011. And the idea at that time was really to propose to the employer an incentive to attract people from abroad for people that are, I would say, highly qualified. So now the good news is that the regime has been clearly simplified and becoming really more attractive for either the employer and for the employee. So that's really nice to have this new regime that apply because, to make it short, now there will be like a tax exemption for the employee corresponding to 50% of the total annual remuneration received, cap at 400,000 euro for the year. That's really a tool, a key tool to attract people from abroad. We know how hard it is to attract people, and especially in your system and as a startup. So clearly, that could be a way to attract people with new skill, new talent, or qualify on a specific on a specialization to make them arrive in Luxembourg. This is more or less what just I said before, so I just went a bit quicker on this, but definitely before the modification of the regime, definitely it was not so simple to implement it. Indeed, it was based on actual expenses that were covered by the employer, so like the travel, like the tax equalization, so meaning the difference between the taxation in the home country compared to Luxembourg, or also what was the difference of the cost of living between the two countries. So it was like full of calculation that would need to provide it. That was not so easy to implement at the end. So now with this new flat rate system, we only have a look to the whole remuneration that are provided to the employee and made a 50% flat rate that apply to have the tax exemption. So clearly, conditions are much more simpler and much more attractive for both employer and employee. There are still some conditions that needs to be respected. There are some conditions at the level of the employee. So the employee to become eligible to this new, and even in the past it was the same, but to this expatriate regime, they need to become resident in Luxembourg based on the internal law, so on the domestic law. In terms of remuneration, the annual gross remuneration, the minimum one, should not be lower than 75,000 euro before the incorporation of any additional benefit in kind or in cash. There are also conditions related to being Luxembourg tax resident in the past, or also in the limitation in terms of kilometers between a border of Luxembourg and the country or the town where the collaborator comes from. So it should not be less than 150 kilometers. And it's really counted by with the border corresponding to the city, and really with the fly, like a bird, fly bird. And not having subject to tax for the 5 past years. So that's really something important. In terms of the two last conditions, indeed, the employee should work at least 75% on the working time with the new employer in Luxembourg, and do not replace a non-expatriate employee, meaning do not replace someone in the firm. There are other conditions that are more corresponding to a secondment, which might not be really relevant for you as a startup, but definitely these conditions are still in the PowerPoint to make the regime available. And in case of local recruitment, which might be more relevant for you as a startup, it's key that the collaborator or the future collaborator have a deep specialization in a sector, which makes maybe even more sense in a startup in the startup trend. At the level of the employer might be located in Luxembourg. And it's also important to note, but once again, that might not be a big criteria for you as a startup or even as a scale-up, because the total number of employees benefiting from this regime cannot exceed 30%. But this is only when the company or the entity has existing for at least 10 years. So that's the reason why I said that maybe for you as a startup and definitely for you as a scale-up, this might not be so relevant. So maybe no ceiling in terms of number of people that could benefit from this measure. In terms of the duration of the application of this regime could be applicable for a period of 8 tax year following the entry of the employee in Luxembourg. So meaning that if we count the year of entry into service of the employee in Luxembourg, it would be in total more or less 9 years. So that's really a good incentive and also working on the retention of the talent. As I said before, this regime is not new. So if you already have people in your entity who benefit from the previous regime, they can either continue to do so, so continue from the previous regime, or ask for the benefit of the new one. So actually, this is something that needs to be discussed between you and the concerned collaborator to see if there is indeed positive way to switch into the new regime. Once again, as long as the conditions are met. Briefly here, an example of Jack, who has been recruited from the UK and who moved to Luxembourg on the 1st January 2025. The idea here is really to launch a brand new activity in the company in Luxembourg. So he will not replace anyone from the company because he has a specialization is in a dedicated sector that no one has locally and in the firm. So he received an annual remuneration of 350,000 euro a year. So it could fit on the condition of the regime. And it means that, once again, we are not talking about any type of expenses or any computation that needs to be run on a way or on another. We are only taking the total remuneration that you will receive and then count half of it as tax exempted. So meaning that here in this example, 175,000 euro on an annual basis would be completely exempted from income tax, not from social security once again, but we're only focusing on income tax, but still a high incentive and a high way to attract people. As I said, here all the startups are eligible. The only thing that needs to be verified, but which is the same that as we've seen previously, is the eligibility condition that are met at the level of the employee to make sure that indeed all the conditions linked to the future collaborator are fully completed. So the presentation of the different tax measure is now over. As I said, well, I know that it's a lot of information, a lot of different threshold, ceiling, tax exemption. So I think you will have the possibility to have the slide, but I sincerely hope that this would answer or at least give you some information about how to use those tax elements to attract and to retain your collaborator. The government is still working on the attraction and the retention of the talent, as I said. And on the other hand, they're also working on the universe of the startup. So I'm pretty sure that by the end of the year, we may have the possibility to present you again some, we hope, some news for you as a startup, because we know that there are some ongoing information and good news for you to come. Last slide, maybe it would be a recap of the different tax measure so that you have a quick overview on the different measure with like the main information that you need to keep in mind regarding the different exemption, regarding the different condition on either on the company or on the eligible employees. Thank you very much for your attention. I will give back the floor to Marielle if you want to conclude.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, Gwendoline, for having presented such an insightful session about those important tax incentives. For those who would like to rewatch or have missed this webinar, there will be a recording which we will send you via email later on. And yes, with this, I wish you all a good afternoon. Thank you again, Gwendoline, and have a good day. Thank you very much.